I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Imagination Connoisseurs, in association with Max Allan Collins Productions, presents True Noir, the fully immersive audio drama adapted by Max Allan Collins from the first book in the Nathan Heller series, True Detective, a 10-chapter series with a star-studded cast. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, this is the thing that I might be most proud of that I've ever worked on in my entire career. It's up for pre-order. You can pre-order it on Kickstarter at True Noir. Please support. I'm recording another actor tomorrow I can't believe has signed on to the project, but I'll tell you about that later. Head over to Kickstarter, look up True Noir, and support the project. I promise you, you're gonna love it. Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your Master of Fun and Wonder, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your Sommelier of Sci-Fi, your Evangelist of the Imagination, and the perhaps never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm, of course, Rob-casting at you. You Imagination Connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode 981. That march to the 1,000-minute episode 1,000 is coming shortly. I don't know, I'm still deeply immersed in the production of this audio drama. Got a few more actors to record, and then our Walla group, and then, hey, we're almost done with the acting phase. We're going to go right into, we've been in post-production this entire time, but it's going to be exciting. Listen, I got to tell you, first of all, that last episode I did talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, a lot of people watched that. Got a lot of new subscribers. I want to thank you all for subscribing. It's great to have you here. You know, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about fandom. Like I do. I've been a fan for a long time. Somebody sent me on X. I used to be on a semi-regular role. I was a regular guest on. It was kind of like Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, or now Real Time. There was a show that was hosted by Blind Date's Roger Lodge that was on the Sci-Fi Channel once a week called SF Vortex, and I was a pundit, and that was back in the mid '90s, '96. I was on TV back then, and I hadn't seen. It was me, Mark Altman, and TV Guide's Michael Logan talking about the sci-fi television of 1996, and it wasn't great back then, but we were talking about what were the best shows, and so I put it up on my Facebook page, and I retweeted it on X if you want to look at that. But I realized just how long I've been in the fan space. I guess I've been a professional fan talking about this stuff. And I'm amazed that I'm still, literally my whole life. I've been a fan my whole life. I've been going to conventions since I was like 10 years old, believe it or not, in the 70s, late 70s. And Seattle, back in the 70s, I've talked about this before, but a really great Star Trek fan organization called the PSST, the Puget Sound Star Trekkers. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, Star Trek, I think, has a lot to do with what I'm going to talk about today. But, I was talking about how while I really enjoyed the experience of seeing Deadpool and Wolverine, it was a lot of fun, it was very entertaining, it left me a little empty. And a lot of people, and I got to thinking, like, it still was entertaining. Performances were a lot of fun. The movie put a big smile on my face. It had a lot of things that were just hilarious, and it's going to end up making, however much money it makes, over $1 billion. So the real question is, does it matter? And I believe it does. And I believe it matters because a lot people that aren't fans, casual moviegoers. I don't like calling people normies. They used to call them at science fiction conventions when I was growing up, the mundanes. And I've always been, I don't like the idea that you can use whatever group that you belong to, and you can dismiss others that don't belong to your group. I don't like that. I mean, I see a lot of marginalized groups these days. They're getting their voice, and the first thing they do is turn around and go after people that they believe were their oppressors. And as I've said on the show very many times, you can't trade one oppression for another. And I never liked that about fandom, because fandom was niche. You know, when I was a kid, I was a very social kid. I had girlfriends from an early age. I played sports. I snow skied. I was gregarious. I liked people. So I had a pretty good time of it. But I didn't have, my fan passions were shared by very few people. And it was the thing that I was most into. I mean, if people knew how much time I spent contemplating warp nacelles or the various power levels of superheroes. I mean, could Superman defeat Silver Surfer? Who was more powerful? And universally, if there was a universal conflict, would the Justice League really be able to defeat the Avengers when you had people like Vision? I mean, how would that work? I mean, there was so much of this stuff I spent. It was filling my head. And if I wasn't contemplating these flights of fancy and this ridiculousness, I was reading novels, and I was listening to music or soundtrack albums, or I was building spaceship models. I mean, it was all consuming. But you have to ask yourself, like, I wasn't using fandom to escape my boring real life. My real life was exciting. I mean, the lesson I took away from Star Trek was boldly go in life. You know, boldly learn how to speak French to go to France and meet French girls, and then boldly go into them. You know what I mean? And that's what all of this, like, I knew I was never going to be a superhero, but that doesn't mean you couldn't live boldly and live an exciting life. And the thing that fandom instilled in me overall, I would say, if someone asked me, what was it that fandom brought to me? And it was a certain sense of awe and wonder about the world around us. And the things that I was a fan of were the result of human imagination taking stories, which are obviously what do stories do but convey basic human truths to other people in narrative form. The best stories, like I've said, the best fiction is the most truthful. And, I had an old girlfriend that used to give me a hard time because I read so many novels. What have I read last? I mean, the last novel I read was the Michael Crichton, James Patterson Eruption a couple weeks ago. Now I'm reading a nonfiction book. But she used to give me a hard time, and she's like, well, why do you read so many novels when you could be reading history? And I read history, and you could read a lot more nonfiction. And I always said to her, and I don't know if she really bought it, but I said, a great novelist has to understand human behavior. A great novel has to have verisimilitude. You have to believe it. You have to, it has to make sense. And even though fantasy stories and science fiction stories and horror stories were obviously not real, to me, I liked the package they came in. The sweet, delightful, nougaty goodness of genre fiction, but it had to have meaning in it. So I was never one of those people who was, oh, it's just a flight of fancy, Rob. What does it matter? It doesn't have to have reality. I mean, can't you just turn your brain off and enjoy it? No, because I wanted fiction that had truth in it. I wanted the truthful fiction, and you could be as outlandish as you wanted to be, but I wanted to believe in the outlandishness. And that's why I was making I was comparing Days of Future Past, which was a really interesting apocalyptic Wolverine story where, look, the Sentinels were going to kill all the mutants unless Wolverine was successful back in 1973 to stop, the creation of these Sentinels that would later hunt down all the mutants 50 years later. And to a certain extent, that's kind of the same plot as Deadpool and Wolverine. I know the intent was different. So, and it got me thinking, like, look, Deadpool and Wolverine, by any stretch of the imagination, I do believe that Ryan Reynolds, Sean Levy, and Hugh Jackman and all of their collaborators made the movie they wanted to make. I would have liked to have had it mean more to me. But I don't necessarily think they were going for the emotional wallop that I think Days of Future Past packed, which is fine. But the real question is, does that mean, did I want to like Deadpool and Wolverine more? I did. I wanted it to resonate with me. But as a confection, and as it was designed, it's entertaining lots of people, and it's going to make a ton of money. And that's all you can ask of a movie. I can say, oh, yes, I want more out of life. But that doesn't mean that I should, while it didn't entertain me as much as I wanted it to, that doesn't really matter. What matters is, did it make money? Which that's obviously, it's a product to be sold, so it's supposed to make money, but it's making money because it's wildly entertaining, so that's okay. But the thing that I didn't discuss, and as everyone knows, I'm fascinated by the business of Hollywood. And I was a huge proponent, and I've been a large supporter. And for the most part, I've really loved, and I talked a lot about this the other day, how much I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And obviously, there's a lot of comic book purists, ever since they started making like the X-Men movies 25 years ago. Well, how come they're not? There's even the joke made when Wolverine says, "What do you?" Or Scott says to Wolverine, "What would you prefer, yellow spandex?" And while a lot of people might have been disappointed in the leather mission wear that the X-Men wore in Bryan Singer's first X-Men movie, it made sense, I think, to create verisimilitude in that world. I think Bryan did a really great job by anchoring it with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and, of course, Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. And you had Toad, and you had all the X-Men, and you had Sabretooth and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but it could have gone south if you had a director that wasn't looking to create reality, verisimilitude. It could have gone south, and it might not have worked. And certainly Lauren Schuler Donner wanted a more of a comic booky film than she ended up getting, and she thought it wasn't going to succeed, which is why she didn't go to the Ellis Island premiere of the first X-Men. And I totally understand that. She didn't understand, because if you weren't, the funny thing about people that are comic book fans, what non-comic book fans don't understand is comic book readers take it very seriously. The medium in America, graphic storytelling, has never been, because it's mostly been a medium that people perceived as being targeted at younger people, whereas in Japan and in Europe, graphic storytelling had a little better pedigree, and it was never as frowned upon as it was here. But people don't understand that comic book fans take all of this very seriously. So the thing that has fascinated me was, of course, the big news that came out of Comic-Con, not just past weekend, but the weekend before, of Robert Downey Jr. taking over the role of Victor Von Doom. Now, truth be told, I had heard this insider information for quite some time ago, and I had been sitting on this information. I hadn't really shared it with anybody. And yet, even though I heard this information, I had questions about it. I think the big question that everybody is asking is, how's this going to work? Is Robert Downey Jr. just going to play Victor Von Doom or is it going to be something different and more complex? Well, I have a theory. Now, let me just say that my theory is not based on any insider information. But as, everything in my life does, it comes down or back to Star Trek. But before I get to my theory, I want to just first define, for those of you who might not be familiar with the comics and understand, Doctor Doom is the marquee villain of the Marvel Comics universe. There are others, Kingpin obviously being one of them, but Doctor Doom was introduced early on in the Fantastic Four. Let me just read a little bit about Doctor Doom, and this comes from the Marvel database. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Victor Von Doom of Earth 616. King of space, master of the sun, you claim such vast domains. Is it to balance your small souls? Could I not lay claim to the light and the void if I wished it? Have I not earned such titles? I, who have mastered all arts, all sciences, all secrets, whose technology and magic cross the stars as easily as they scramble an alpha telepath's mind. Who would dare to say I have not earned the right? Yet I am king of a simple nation on a simple planet, a beloved garden tended by iron hands, and the only title I have ever claimed is Doctor. That's a great quote from Dr. Doom. Dr. Victor Von Doom, Ph.D., a.k.a. Dr. Doom, is a Latvian politician who serves as the monarch and supreme leader for the Kingdom of Latveria. He was scarred from an accident and wears an iron mask and armor to hide his true face. He is considered one of the most brilliant minds and scientists on the planet Earth. Really? He is considered one of the most brilliant minds and scientists on the planet Earth. He's also a sorcerer with skills in magic, matching the most powerful beings in the universe, making him a potential candidate for Sorcerer Supreme. He hopes to bring order and betterment to humanity through world conquest. Unequaled in ability, age, and willpower, he has come into conflict with both superhumans and cosmic beings. He is best known as the rival of Reed Richards and the arch enemy of the Fantastic Four. So you can go to this. You can go to the Marvel database and read all about Victor Von Doom. But I think just by what I just read, I can ease you into my thoughts about this and where I think this is all going. But before I get to my theory, I'd like to read an article. And this article was published 3 days ago, and it was written by Eric Pierce. It's on Medium in their Fanfare section. But I figured it was a great place to start because it's sort of, how would I put this? It was, and I just messed it up, but hang on a second so I can, I didn't mean to do that, but I screwed it all up now. Damn it, what have I done? So I can read it to you, but let me just fix what I have screwed up here. So I found this article, and again, you know, I do like to read, and the people that write for Medium aren't necessarily geniuses, but I do a lot of the time enjoy their takes, and I thought that they had a pretty good take. This gentleman had a pretty great take, and let me just recrop this article and bring it back to where it was because I messed it up. So let me make it smaller so I can read a few. So I apologize for messing it up, and boy, I really did mess this up, and I certainly apologize, and I don't know why I did this. But anyway, maybe I can't put this back, and maybe I will just have to deal with this. Oh no, there we go. Hang on, hold on, just give me a minute, and I will fix this. Okay, it's fixed. I fixed this. Now let me just go back to the article and show it to you. And thank you for bearing with me, because you know. So here's the article, and again, it was on the Fanfare section of Medium. Robert Downey Jr. returns as the MCU as a villain, Masterstroke, or Misstep. No matter how you slice it, this looks like a move of desperation. But is it? Is it? And we're going to get to that, but I'm going to read this article. Last weekend, it was announced, and by the way, this is by Eric Pierce. Last weekend, it was announced that Robert Downey Jr. would be returning to the Marvel Cinematic Universe he helped create. Robert Downey Jr. famously and brilliantly played Tony Stark Iron Man for 11 years in 10 films before permanently hanging up the helmet. He died. And if I can editorialize here, Kevin Feige said they are not going to undo I Am Iron Man. They're not going to undo a sacrifice, which is smart. Fan favorites Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson also retired their tights around the same time. Along with Chadwick Boseman's tragic passing, the departures left a sizable chasm in the roster Marvel has been unable to fill even after 5 years. The unprecedented run from Iron Man to Endgame was historically great. Apart from a few fumbles, those films are all bangers. So you could suggest Marvel was due for a bad turn. one hastened by the end of the Infinity Saga, a conclusion so final it necessitated a soft reset of the franchise. The novelty is also largely gone. You've seen one megalomaniac intent on destroying the world and ruling over the ashes. You've seen them all. But it's also easy to believe a degree of hubris contributed to the MCU's downturn. If you've had the Midas touch for over a decade, you start to believe you can do no wrong. Marvel somehow made Ant-Man exciting, a character whose powers are probably definitely a metaphor for erections, but their finest trick is also their luckiest. The initial MCU was built around characters so undesirable that a cash-poor Marvel had been unable to sell their film rights during a fire sale in the 90s. Sony famously had a chance to buy the rights to almost every Marvel character for $25 million. They instead purchased the rights to Spider-Man for $7 million and offered this helpful rejoinder: nobody gives a damn about the other Marvel characters. And this is the writer talking. I wonder if that Sony exec still has a job. The thing is, Sony wasn't entirely wrong. Spider-Man was the clear top dog. Everything else was second fiddle or worse. Marvel was eventually able to license the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Blade, Punisher, Daredevil, Ghost Rider, and Hulk. So when they decided to take a play from Thanos' playbook and do movies themselves, they only had the unwanted leftovers to work with. Characters who'd been passed over by every studio in Hollywood. Characters the market had deemed worthless. It seems really weird to type those words sitting here in 2024, knowing what we know now, but this was lived experience. I remember scoffing at the announcement that Marvel was making movies about Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. It seemed like a terrible idea. Thor was a space god, and Captain America was so old he'd literally punched out Hitler. How do you make them relatable, interesting, or exciting? I at least knew something about Cap and Thor, and Iron Man had never really pinged my radar, even though I was a comic-reading kid in the 80s. I had issues of Iron Man, but never really cared about him. He was a guy in a suit. Yawn. My personal pecking order of Marvel characters in the 80s and 90s was Spider-Man, the X-Men including Magneto, the Incredible Hulk, Doctor Doom, Daredevil, and that's about it. Marvel, building a billion-dollar franchise on the shoulders of third-rate characters, is probably the clearest sign of their storytelling acumen. They made us care, and in the process, flipped the script on which characters were considered valuable. They've earned all of their unfathomable success, but luck clearly played an outsized role. There would be no MCU if not for Sony's short-sighted, if hilarious, "It's a no for me, dog." At some point, Marvel started to believe their own hype, which is how you turn a dark storyline about a serial killer of gods into a prolonged orgy joke. Or assassinate the character of Wanda Maximoff so you can have a horror film. Or create Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a bland and cliched bowl of meh. I'm enough of a nerd that I remain aware of all MCU developments, even if I've emotionally checked out of the relationship. I'm interested in seeing Deadpool and Wolverine, but I wouldn't say I'm overly excited about it. My heart just isn't in it. This is probably what burnout looks like. My enthusiasm for the MCU has been drained by too many movies that didn't aim for anything other than spectacle, and too many Disney Plus shows that serve no purpose other than to keep my subscription active. I don't think I'm alone in this. In fact, I know I'm not. We can quibble over whether or not the MCU's cultural significance is on the wane. I say yes, definitely, but there's no arguing which way Marvel Studios' finances are trending. And here are this is a chart, global box office in hundreds of millions. I'm sorry it's not that big, but if you look, this is the MCU. This is why Marvel is paying Robert Downey Jr. untold millions to come back. Please, 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 and save the MCU. I'd be lying if I didn't say the news hit me where I live. The pivot was necessitated after Kang the Conqueror was revealed to be a second-rate Thanos, and Kang actor Jonathan Majors was outed as an abusive asshole. Marvel was saddled with an uninspiring villain they suddenly needed to recast. Instead, they wisely went in a different direction, which further invalidates Quantumania, music to my ears, but also threatens to topple all the careful story scaffolding Marvel has erected to make a properly fearful Kang. A problem, but not a deal-breaker in a cinematic universe that has embraced time travel and the multiverse. First, we got word that the Russo brothers, who presided over the greatest superhero movie run ever, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame, which I, by the way, totally agree with, are returning to direct the next two Avengers films, since revealed to be Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. The bombshells kept falling. Screenwriter Stephen McFeely, who co-wrote all the Russo brothers' MCU films along with Christopher Marcus, is writing Doomsday and Secret Wars. Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU. Impossible, you say. Tony Stark died, you claim. Well, that alone wouldn't stop Marvel from making it happen if both parties were down to party. There have been rumors for years about Tony coming back via hologram, replicant, sex doll. Okay, I made up the last one. Well, the thing is, he's not playing Tony Stark this time. He's not? I'll get to that. The Russo brothers are directing the next two Avengers films. Screenwriter Stephen McFeely is writing the scripts. Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU. Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doctor Doom. Marvel is emptying the vault to make this reunion possible. Variety is reporting that the Russos are being paid $80 million to direct the two films. Robert Downey Jr. is being paid significantly more to play Doctor Doom, who is basically the Darth Vader of the Marvel Universe. And I'd like to editorialize for a moment. Again, this is all the writer of this article. Doctor Doom is my favorite comic book villain of all time. He has an iconic look, an Iron Man type of suit, with the aesthetic of a Marvel knight who attends Eyes Wide Shut soirees. He's crazy powerful, wielding a mix of science and magic, so much so that it takes the entire Fantastic Four to fight him. He's the king of an Eastern European country. He's a genius, a narcissist, and a madman, and he wears a cape. I've been waiting for this casting ever since Marvel announced that they were working on the Fantastic Four. Doctor Doom is the villain of the MCU. You'd be forgiven for thinking Thanos has that crown, but Thanos was a one-trick purple pony. Doctor Doom, despite his name, isn't so unrelentingly evil. Usually he ends his run counter to the common good, and therefore the heroes rally to stop him, but sometimes he fights alongside the good guys. In Facebook parlance, his relationship with the Fantastic Four is complicated. It makes for interesting conflicts. I believe Robert Downey Jr. can nail Doom's personality. Tony Stark is already 3/4 of the way there. He just needs to tone down the quips and amp up the malevolence. But the question I've been pondering is, should he? Is Robert Downey Jr. really the best Marvel could do? Or is this move of desperation spurred by increasing indifference to the MCU? Let's first address the genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist in the corner. Robert Downey Jr. has been the face of the MCU for so long, it will be really weird seeing him as a bad guy. There's no way to see him in a Marvel movie and not think, that's Tony Stark. This is nothing like when Chris Evans played Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and then was cast as Captain America. It's more like if Harrison Ford had returned to Star Wars as Darth Vader, except Ford was never the face of Star Wars and he only played Han Solo in 4 movies. It's just kind of crazy, right? Interesting PR move, though. The goodish news. Doctor Doom spends all his time wearing a metal mask. Casting Robert Downey Jr. as a villain who never removes his helmet is one way to sidestep the, hey, that's definitely Tony Stark problem. It does make you wonder why you'd even bother casting Robert Downey Jr. in the first place, though, doesn't it? Other than the obvious excitement of bringing Robert Downey Jr. back. I have to believe multiversal shenanigans will be involved to explain why Doctor Doom looks a lot like Tony Stark. It makes sense, actually. There are a lot of similarities between the two characters. Both are egotistical geniuses with deep pockets and the coolest tech around. This could be a cautionary tale, a sort of what-if that results in Tony Stark becoming the world's greatest villain, and Marvel has shown they love the multiverse. I'm less of a fan, but tomato, potato. Except Marvel haven't left themselves very much runway to get this bird off the ground. Or have they? Doom needs to arrive more or less fully formed because we're only getting him for 2 movies. Really? The comparisons to Thanos are inescapable, so we might as well lean into them. Thanos appeared briefly in 3 films, and his presence shadowed most of the MCU, starting with the Avengers, before his official debut in Infinity War. We'll be lucky to get one Doctor Doom post-credit scene before Avengers Doomsday. Really? This is actually my biggest problem with the casting. It seems to put a really short fuse on Doctor Doom. Robert Downey Jr. will be safely in his 60s by the time these 2 Avengers films release. I don't care how much CGI Marvel relies on. A borderline geriatric villain ain't scaring nobody. But let's say Marvel sufficiently de-ages Robert Downey Jr. How long is he going to play this character? Hint, his deal was for 2 movies. Was it? Are we truly getting only 2 movies with Doctor Doom, Marvel's best villain bar none? This seems impossibly stupid. Will Marvel recast Doom? If that's the plan, why bring back Robert Downey Jr. in the first place? Recall that these are all fairly recent developments. Quantumania, Kang's big screen christening, released in February 2023. Though Marvel officially moved on from Majors after he was convicted of sexual assault in December, they likely started working on contingencies in March 2023 after Majors was arrested, and also when they released Kang, when they realized Kang was a boring villain, actually. That seems like plenty of time to bang something into place, but also not enough time to counter the years-long gestation Marvel projects typically undergo. The MCU is built around phases for a reason. They like to seed things and give them time to sprout. Doctor Doom is getting none of that. It's actually Marvel's stubborn reliance on phases that's part of the problem. Each phase is meant to build toward a no-holds-barred, superpowered brawl against the biggest of bads. Once Kang tapped out of the next 2-part Avengers throwdown, someone else needed to tap in. So Marvel frantically started playing Doom's music and sent him running out of the tunnel half-dressed, instead of doing the sensible thing and pushing back the conclusion of Phase 6 a year or 2. Doesn't Doctor Doom deserve at least a modicum of setup? But as always, capitalism is both the ends and the means of these things. The show must go on because the shareholders demand it. And if this gambit is successful at galvanizing audiences to return to theaters in droves, what does it say about the MCU that it can only be successful by giving us the same old faces? What does it say about us? There are no answers here, only lots and lots of questions. One thing about all this, it's got us talking about the MCU again, and not just in, man, the MCU kind of sucks these days way. Despite everything I just said, I'm curiously optimistic. I adore the Russo brothers' MCU films, and Robert Downey Jr. is an incredible actor. Plus, we're getting Doctor freaking Doom. Gotta love it. I'm just afraid that in the rush to clear of the Kang fiasco, Marvel is going to make a bigger mess of things. You only get one shot at something like this, and Marvel is charging into it with none of the forethought and setup that characterized their other films. If you can look past the splashy headlines, the vibes are just not good. So I wanted to share that article. See, here's the thing. I agree with most of this, and I agree that introducing Doctor Doom in an Avengers movie, in Avengers Doomsday, with no setup, with just Robert Downey Jr. taking the mantle of Doctor Doom, would be anticlimactic from the get. It's not going to work. So here's where I'm gonna propose. Let's say that I was friends with Kevin Feige. I've never met the man. I've never spoken to him really. I might have met him in passing on the set of X-Men 2 or something, but I've always admired him. I admire what he's done. I really think that the first 23 movies of the Infinity Saga are, maybe the greatest achievement in fantasy cinema in all of Hollywood history. It wasn't his fault that they decided to build a streaming service around Marvel and Star Wars, and he had to deliver. They didn't care about the quality. They don't understand those things, but that's for another stream. But the Robert Downey Jr. thing, I know it might look as a desperate move on their part, and a foolish move, really, if you think about it. Kind of foolish. Like, why do that? Comic fans who love Doctor Doom are expecting Victor Von Doom, however it works. Now, we've seen 4 versions of him already. Julian McMahon played Doctor Doom. So, here's, and again, I have to quantify this or qualify this by saying I don't know whether this is true or not. I have no idea. It's just a theory. But if I was friends with Kevin Feige and he brought this idea to me and we were talking about it, As a Star Trek fan, or as a It's a Wonderful Life fan, or take your pick. But I know Robert Downey Jr. I know Kevin Feige's a big Star Trek fan. When I was a kid, and maybe to a certain extent this day, one of my favorite episodes of the original series is the second season episode, Mirror Mirror, second season of Star Trek, written by Jerome Bixby. First time we see the Mirror Universe. Our characters are talking to the Halkan Council about their dilithium crystals, and they end up beaming back up to the ship during an ion storm, and a transposition takes place, and our crew, Scotty, McCoy, Uhura, and Captain Kirk, beam into an alternate universe where everything was reversed. Good people are evil. Spock has a beard. You ascend to the captaincy of the Enterprise by assassinating the person right above you. There are agony booths. Dr. McCoy, when he's the Dr. McCoy in the evil universe, or people in the sick bay, they bet on the people's tolerance for pain. It's not a great place. But it was an interesting way to examine what our characters might look like. And it was a quick, interesting way into examining that dichotomy. Now, as a Star Trek fan, there are other great episodes. There is a fifth season? Oh, see, I'm slipping. There's a Next Generation episode called Tapestry. Some of you might remember it. Q gives Picard a glimpse of his life if he didn't get into a bar fight with these Nausicaans and get stabbed and have to have an artificial heart put in. What his life would have looked like if he played it on the straight and narrow. And it wasn't exactly as interesting, and it wasn't as meaningful as his life is the way we know him after he did make some foolish and impetuous chances. He took some chances. And it made his life more interesting. Those stories, those sliding door stories, or if you watch a wonderful film that stars Jared Leto and not enough people have seen it, get the director's cut if you can, a science fiction movie called Mr. Nobody. If you've never seen Mr. Nobody, I think it's a wonderful science fiction film. Not enough people have talked about, but the idea is the road less traveled, or the road not traveled. Now, as I read to you the description off the Marvel website, Dr. Doom and Tony Stark are very similar. It's just they took different paths. But super scientists, technologists, Dr. Doom went into magic and sorcery. Tony Stark did not. But here's my theory. February 13th, 2026 is an untitled Marvel movie. And it's the Marvel movie that we're going to get right before Doomsday, Avengers Doomsday. I posit that movie is going to be about Dr. Doom. Or it's going to be about Tony Stark's alternative path. Because if you go back to the very beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first Iron Man is a story about one man's epiphany, one man's crisis of conscience, questions what he's been doing, gets captured, goes in Afghanistan, almost gets blown up by his own company's ordnance, and he decides to change his life. Well, what if it went a little different? What if it had a different result? I maintain, now, I don't know if this happens on the Fantastic Four world that we're going to see, and it happens later because the Fantastic Four obviously disappear. They live in a Tomorrowland 60s, and they disappear for whatever reason. I think the Fantastic Four were probably called the Fantastic Four because they were adventurers before they went into space and got affected by gamma radiation or whatever. I don't know. Who knows how they're going to play it? Because one of the things I've really enjoyed about the MCU is that there's a fealty to the comic book characters, but the events can be changed. I think Tony Stark is going to be Tony Stark. That our version of Doctor Doom is going to be Tony Stark. And I don't think it's going to be the exact same thing that happens, but we're going to see a movie that's going to be very similar to the first Iron Man. And here's been my problem with the multiverse. It hasn't had any substance to it. You know, we meet basically the Illuminati in Multiverse of Madness, and they're taken out by Wanda in 5 minutes. So we've never met anybody of any weight or gravitas as a result of the multiverse. It's all been kind of really disappointing. And everybody in the multiverse is disposable. Let's prune your reality, whatever. Let's banish you to the void. They haven't made it mean anything. And the big problem with the multiverse is that none of those stories seem to matter at all. So who cares? What they haven't done is ground any of them in reality. But everybody loves a sliding doors story, especially if it's good. So I would posit that maybe we're going to see the Tony Stark version of Doctor Doom at the end of Fantastic Four or something. Don't know. But I think that the Untitled Marvel movie, and again, I do not know anything. Nobody has told me anything about this. I want to be really very, very clear. This is complete speculation on my part. But it's what I would do if I ran Marvel. That movie is going to be the Tony Stark, instead of becoming Iron Man, Tony Stark becomes Victor Von Doom. Tony Stark in that universe will die. He will die. Whether he fakes his own death, whether everyone thinks he dies, whether he winds up at Camartage, I don't know what's going to happen. But what's going to happen is we're going to see that movie, and we're going to see, it's going to be Iron Man 1, essentially, but it's going to be the creation of Doctor Doom. And it's going to be what Tony Stark, he's offered an opportunity, and rather than decide to change his ways and become Iron Man and be like, we shouldn't be making arms anymore, he realizes that his ambition to save the world through his super science, and now with the added benefit of sorcery, for whatever happens, I think that Tony Stark is going to be, and here's what's going to happen. As much, and you go back and you watch Iron Man 1 again, it's a great movie. It's a great movie because it's not about an apocalyptic world-ending event brought on by Celestials, by Thanos, by whomever, by Mephisto. It doesn't matter, but it's a personal story. And that's the MCU desperately. How do you pull back? How do you pull back the MCU after Thanos has snapped his fingers? After Arishem the Judge has come? After, adamantium is found in the Indian Ocean in a stony celestial? How do you pull it back? How do you make an audience fascinated by watching a story again that's about one man and his crisis of conscience that instead of going one way goes another? You retell Iron Man 1, but Iron Man 1 becomes the story of the origin of Doctor Doom. And Doctor Doom is the alias that Tony Stark makes for himself after he arranges for his own death, or it appears that he dies. And because he's so smart, because he's so wealthy, he ends up manufacturing, well, once he becomes Doctor Doom, he can take over Latveria, and he does just that. Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom. Can you imagine having parents that name you that? The Von Dooms? Like, come on, in what universe? In our world today, who would take anybody whose last name is Doom seriously? It's an alias. It's a name that he created to achieve his goals. And I can see a world where, again, it's Star Trek. It's, wow, Bedford Falls. It's A Wonderful Life. It's Tapestry. It's all of those sliding doors. It's Mr. Nobody. It's all of those stories that we've seen. And when they're a road less traveled, or a life lived differently, or somebody zigged when they should have zagged, everybody loves those stories. And that's the only way that you can pull back the MCU and make it personal again. Tony Stark starts off as Tony Stark, and then we see him veer the other direction. And the same way that he created his Iron Man persona, we're going to see the mirror of that as he creates Victor Von Doom. However that's going to work. And I'll tell you something. And that's why, because he's going to be Tony Stark. We're going to see Robert Downey Jr.'s face, you know, and then he's going to create the persona. What does he do? He makes Dr. Doom's armor instead of Iron Man's armor. And he has to create this whole new persona. I mean, in the comics, Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom went to college with Reed Richards, and they were rivals in college. We don't need that to happen. The same way that Ultron was different than Ultron was in the comics. We're still going to get a Victor Von Doom. It can still be look, it's not going to be the 616. There is no Fantastic Four in the 616. There never has been. That's why they're going to come from a different universe. They're still going to be the Fantastic Four. They're just going to come to our universe, I think. That's why Doctor Doom doesn't exist in our universe either, but he's going to. But we are going to see the story of one man who goes a different way. That's my theory. That's what I think is going to happen. And I think they're going to make it, because they know, look, the fact that I'm surprised they even announced this when they did. I'm surprised that we didn't get it in the end scene of Fantastic Four. I mean, can you imagine what that would have been like as a post-credit scene where Robert Downey Jr. is exposing himself as... But they knew they could never keep that secret. There was no fucking way that they could make these movies. But, I mean, you can't just introduce Doctor Doom in an Avengers movie. Because who cares? If they were to introduce Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, fully formed in an Avengers film without any preamble, with any lead-up... I don't care, you know, if you're fucking Robert Bolt. I don't care what kind of Hollywood screenwriter you are. You're going to be very hard-pressed in an Avengers movie to make people care about Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, unless they already care about Doctor Doom. And not only do they already care about him, they love him. We are going to, I guarantee you, people. I know people are going to be like, Rob, you know, you're really giving Kevin Feige the benefit of the doubt here. Like, why do you think that they can pull this off? Why? Well, one, because they have to. And two, because it's going to be fucking awesome. Because when you see, people are going to be immediately, what better way than to take a man whose story we already know, a man we already love, and change that story and send him on a different path. Send him on a different path. That's why Robert Downey Jr. is playing him. That's why they didn't go to, you know, Mads Mikkelsen or whoever you wanted to play Doctor Doom. Because they're going to add that, they're going to give that extra added sci-fi, Star Trek, fantasy goodness where you're going to watch that road. Because who doesn't love those stories? That's why when you watch Tapestry, Welcome to the Afterlife, Jean-Luc, you're dead. People love Tapestry. They love watching. It's so easy to watch. Plus, you have that extra added narrative shortcut where you know what that person was in the first place, but when you see them as a pathetic loser, or in a case, instead of being a good guy, go down the bad guy path, it gives you that frisson between the two different personas. How can you not love that? If it's done well, and we're already caught up, it's not about a universe-destroying thing. The story becomes more personal and grounded, and that's what the Marvel Cinematic Universe desperately needs. The story of one guy. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to get big. It's got to take over a whole country and become Victor Von Doom. But that's his secret identity. That's his secret identity. Doctor Doom is Tony Stark's secret identity. And they're going to make that shit work. Again, I really don't, because if I were to say this, they'd demonetize my channel and Marvel would come after me. This is just a theory. But it's a theory based on the fact that I know Kevin Feige loves Star Trek, Mirror Mirror, and Tapestry. Or if you want to look at other episodes like Parallels, I mean, you know, there are other places in Star Trek where you can go and look at where people have obviously counterparts. And there are a lot of science fiction stories that do the same thing. What happens? And I honestly believe that we are going to get that kind of a story. And it's going to be, I think, fucking great. And I think that movie, February 13th, 2026, that has gone unannounced. Now, by the way, if they announce this tomorrow, people can come back at me and go, well, it was a nice idea, Rob, but here's what we're getting. We're getting the Marvels 3 or something. They can't give us that. They can't. And look, they can't tell us because they don't have all the details. They're not going to, and they've pulled that shit before. I give you Spider-Man No Way Home. They're waiting. And I think that's what, because they have to give us that movie. And here's the thing. It's kind of like what they did with Captain America Civil War. They set up all this stuff. They lead right into, we had after that, you had Ant-Man and you had, you had Ant-Man before that. But then Captain America was between the two, or Captain Marvel was between the two. I get all confused. But how cool would that be when you set up this story about Doctor Doom and you love Doctor Doom and then you launch into Doomsday? Which, if you think about it, I mean, Civil War kind of was teeing up Infinity War because it blasted apart the team, the Sokovia Accords and all that. They know what they're doing. And I honestly believe that that's what they're going to do. Maybe I think they have to make a movie about how does Tony Stark how does he, instead of becoming Iron Man, become Doctor Doom? And I think people would buy that because the movie will be good. And you have the added benefit of seeing what happens when... And do I think he's going to be from the 616? Let me be clear, no. It's probably going to be a different universe. Probably the Fantastic Four universe, and Doctor Doom was born later, or something like that. That's how I think it's going to work. But I do think that it's going to be Tony Stark, and I do think we're going to see him make opposite choices, and he becomes a sorcerer. He goes down the dark path. Now, one of the things that I had heard when I was at Comic-Con from reliable sources was that both the Wonder Man series and the Agatha All Along series are pretty good. I heard that, Brave New World was fine, but it was a little superficial. It doesn't have the weight or gravitas that you want from it because it's not Winter Soldier. But we'll wait and see. But I honestly believe that that's what's going to happen with Robert Downey Jr. And who knows? So, and there's going to be a lot of comic purists that don't like this idea because they're tied to the idea of Victor Von Doom. But okay, it's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe has never been like the comics. They've always changed things. I mean, I loved Ed Brubaker's run on the whole Winter Soldier storyline, but it was different. In the comics, it was great, much more sophisticated. But there's going to be a lot of people that are going to not like it, and I get it. But if the movie's good, I mean, why not do something like that? You are dealing with the multiverse, and we do end up having to deal with Secret Wars, and it's not going to be the 80s Secret Wars. It's Battle World and all that. So I do think it will work, and then what happens after Secret Wars is you can get the quote-unquote real Doctor Doom. But I think we have not yet seen a great multiverse story. And if they give us an alternative Iron Man 1, but make it the forging of Tony Stark becoming a Doctor Doom, then they make it personal. Then they validate the multiverse. Then you lead into Doomsday and you lead into Secret Wars and all hell can break loose. But I do think that would be dope. I really think it's going to be great. And we'll see. I could be wrong. But if I, again, was a Kevin Feige's friend, I would say, let's do this, brother. It wasn't my idea. So, we'll see if that's what they're going to do. But that's what I think they're going to do. What do you think? And I don't know. Let's see if anybody has anything. Oh, lots of people have stuff to say. Oh, alrighty then. Okay, well, hang on. Let's. Boy, you guys. A lot of people have stuff to say. So, wow, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what you guys have to say. I hope you're not going to say that you're just full of shit, Rob. I very well could be. Wow, there's an I've never seen this. Chat summary. I'm not even going to say that was weird. I'd never seen that pop up. But there's already a chat summary it's showing me. So Neil Horn sends in a $20 super chat. Neil says, hello, R&B. First, I wish to write you, but I can't find an email or P.O. box address. Where should I look? Second, I've seen the 1/350 scale Enterprise refit by Tomy. Should I save my dollars or buy the gorgeous starship? Well, Neil, buy that gorgeous starship. Buy it, buy it, buy it. It's going to be the best thing ever. It's the greatest fictional starship of all time, the refit. So buy it. And you, come on. You know you have to. All of you should buy it. Everybody. Cyan Gary has been a member for 21 months. Thank you for that. David Gonzalez says, one thing I like about the Robert Downey Jr. casting is that it isn't strictly following the comics. I agree. I enjoy when they retool elements, so this is something new for us as the audience to discover. Totally agree. I mean, the funny thing is I've never understood why you can't make something exactly like the comics. You can't, because comic books are a different medium, and comics, we're a lot more forgiving about things that happen in comic books than we are in real life. So I buy into it. David Gonzalez says, got to start a Star Trek tangent now. Laugh out loud. I loved the Borg, especially in Voyager. Is there a specific novel you would recommend that would have a great Borg storyline? Also, I love these deep dive conversations. Well, David, I can give you a pretty good Borg storyline. But so the Star Trek Litverse, they had a very tight continuity after the end of Deep Space Nine and Voyager, a post-Dominion War continuity. And if you want to read a banger of a Borg story, David Mack wrote the Destiny trilogy. And it's 3 books that deal with a massive Borg invasion of the Alpha Quadrant. It's incredible. It's epic in scope. It's one of the great Star Trek stories ever written. But read that. I think they're collected in one book. And David Mack is one of my favorite Star Trek writers. I just warn you that it does deal with a lot of continuity. You'll be wondering, like, why is Ezri Dax captain of a starship? And there's a lot of, you just kind of have to go with that unless you're going to read 20 years of Star Trek Litverse books. But it's really good. It's really worth reading. And the tightly constructed continuity was worth it. So there you go. Eduardo Ramirez says, Rob, give us an update. How's Bryan Singer doing? Well, I text him and chat periodically. And, he was spending a lot of time in Israel. Bryan has been, let's put it this way, he's been keeping busy. He seems to be doing okay. But, yeah, as a matter of fact, he might be doing something that would surprise a lot of people. What that might be, I would leave up for him to talk about when he's ready. So, yeah. Joe Penora says, with how successful Deadpool 3 has become, will the studio fast-track another with Ryan and Hugh, or should they? I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, it ain't show friends, it's show business. And I wouldn't expect that they would say no to something like that. But again, maybe this should be the last one. I don't know what they're going to do next. It'll be very interesting to see. Maybe I'm all wrong about them making a Doctor Doom movie. But who knows? I mean, I think they have to make a Doctor Doom movie, and I think that the perfect time to schedule it is make it the movie on February 13th that comes out right before Avengers Doomsday. That's what I would do. We'll see. But should they make another movie? Look, if they have a great story to tell, why not? Why not? Alone Abadi has been a member for 21 months. Well, Alone, I hope things go okay in Israel. Everyone's talking about an imminent attack from Hezbollah and Iran. I know we've moved another carrier group into the Mediterranean, so hopefully everyone's safe. So stay safe out there. Rick Alfonso says, Rob, great to see you at San Diego Comic-Con. It was good to see you too, Rick, 2 years in a row. I think Deadpool Wolverine was true to a certain comic book, and that's Marvel's What the? Which made fun of the characters. It's probably true. Rick's a smart guy. Again, I look, as you know, I first was on YouTube talking on Collider Heroes, first AMC Heroes and Collider Heroes with John Schnepp about, I don't understand why people expect comic book movies to duplicate the comic books exactly. They can't. You have to create a level of believability on the movie screen. It's really interesting because, the comic book movies that we got, watch the canon Captain America with, was it Red Brown? It's not so good. And the great thing that the Marvel Cinematic Universe did was it changed things and made them believable. So you could buy off on what went on. I mean, that was the great thing about Iron Man 1, Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. By starting with that movie, it made us believe. I talked about this in the last stream. You get one big ask in a fantasy film. And the big ask was that Iron Man armor is actually it works. It's real. You could believe. They made you believe, because the way the character of Tony Stark was portrayed, you believed him as this super genius billionaire playboy. And you didn't question whether the Iron Man armor would have fallen out of the sky. It made you believe. The old Superman the movie line, you'll believe a man can fly. You'll believe an Iron Man can fly. That's what the gift of Iron Man 1 did. And by making you believe, and as I talked about, you layer in the characters as you went along. And the fact that they made us believe that Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America could exist in the same universe was the great thing that the MCU did. Everything relied on that. And it was pretty great because they made us believe. They didn't ask too much. The rules were established and the movies followed them. And a lot of the time you can't say that about fantasy movies. So they did such a good job. Anyway, David Gonzalez says, do you think that because Marvel initially had to make do with the characters they had, it forced them to be more creative than if they had the full cast available? I'm hoping they keep the storyline focused. Oh, I think what they did was they made us believe. They created characters with verisimilitude. I mean, the great thing about Iron Man 1 is if you take the Iron Man out of it and just told the story of a rich, charismatic playboy who could get laid a lot and had lots of money and then had an epiphany that what his company was doing was wrong, you know, you could have made that movie in the 80s and it would have starred Mel Gibson, you know, or Harrison Ford. And you absolutely would have believed it, and it wouldn't have been a superhero movie. That movie works because the story of Tony Stark is something we all related to and we understood. We all wanted to be him, then we all sympathized with him. And that's what great storytelling's all about. And, yeah. And I think they could have made it work with anybody. The great thing about Iron Man 1 is it was, I think, a lot easier. Like, as I said, Kevin Feige worked on 14 Marvel movies before Iron Man 1. He saw what worked with, say, the X-Men, or what worked or didn't work with Daredevil and Elektra, what worked with Ghost Rider, or didn't work with Ghost Rider, what worked with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. He saw those things and could see and focus, and he knew. And they knew from the get that Iron Man was going to be a workable film that was going to have heart and substance, and that movie works whether the Iron Man technology is in it or not. Eduardo Ramirez says X1, X2, Superman Returns, and Days of Future Past is better than the Russo run. Okay, I would say it's different. I mean, I like all four of those movies, and other than Days of Future Past, I made documentaries about three of them, X1, X2, and Superman Returns, which you can see on those physical media releases. But, you know, they're different. They're different kinds of movies. But I do think that, you know, I would add, even though Brian didn't direct it, I think X1, X2, First Class, and Days of Future Past are four great X-Men movies. And you can't take away anything from them because they're all pretty great. Danks says, I thought they said he wouldn't be a Tony variant. Well, it could be that, I mean, variant or not, maybe he's the actual Tony Stark. And his changed the universe. I don't know. But maybe they don't think that way, or maybe they're just saying that. I have no idea. I mean, I gave you my theory. I don't know what the ins and outs of it are or aren't. But I do think it works. But you're right. They did say that. But is he a variant? I mean, if you're, like, for instance, is the Mirror Spock a variant in Mirror Mirror? Or is, from his perspective, he's not a variant? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it. Joe Penora says, it would be cool if Stark knew his parents were murdered and that caused him to go the Doom route. That could very well be. That could very well be. It's going to be something along those lines. It's going to be something, and I think that that's how it's going to work. It's going to be something we all relate to, and we're all going to be like, oh, man. Darius White sends in a super chat and says, thanks for your POV, Robert. Really appreciate it. If what you say about Tony becoming Doom comes to fruition, I might give it a chance, but boy, howdy, will I mourn not getting the true Victor Von Doom. But you know what? I mean, when you think about all the different storylines and all the times that Doctor Doom has been portrayed in many different, like we all have our favorite storylines with Doom. You know, what is it? Is it the hardcover with Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange? I always like that. Didn't Mignola do that? I always like that. But you know, Doctor Doom has been around for so long. There's so many different storylines, and remember, we've seen incarnations of Doctor Doom, and they haven't really worked very well on screen. And I like the idea of seeing a Doctor Doom, you know, look, they've cast Robert Downey Jr. How are they going to do it? They might just make him Doctor Doom. But I think it's going to be more interesting if they show us the road less traveled, only because I think that story would be interesting. Look, and we saw this. It's not like, you know, what if Tony Stark became Doctor Doom? That's the obvious. Call it that if you want. Those what if stories, you know, what if Conan the Barbarian was in the 20th century with the Bill Sienkiewicz cover? Those things can be irresistible, but if you look that way, I think the problem that they've had with the multiverse is we just don't give a fuck. But you make Tony Stark turning into Doctor Doom, and it's Robert Downey Jr., live action, if it's done well, you get your Tapestry. You know, but it's now going to be extended over a couple. And when I say Tapestry, if you guys don't know your TNG, it would kind of be pointless. But go back and watch the episode Tapestry. I want to say it's season 5, could be season 6. I know it's terrible. I should just know off the top of my head. But go watch Tapestry, and then if you want, go watch Star Trek: The Original Series. Watch Mirror Mirror. The best the Mirror universe has ever been is still that episode. I mean, you could look at the Enterprise 2-parter, and it's fun, but there's a lot of inconsistencies, but it's fun. D's Webos says, who are the Avengers, though? That's the challenge. Maybe there were no Avengers. I don't know. Who knows? Secular Monk says, I recently read that you may have been helping Bryan Singer with a Superman Returns sequel. How would that have gone? Who was the villain? Happy birthday. Well, here's the thing. When I was working on, when Superman Returns wrapped and it was about to come out, Brian and I spent a lot, you know, we had a lot of coffee together. You know, we hung out a lot. And I was just musing what a Superman Returns, there is a Superman Returns script for a sequel. But when I was just musing and talking with him, I wasn't writing a script with Bryan Singer. We were just talking about what it could be. And somebody did actually a story on this on YouTube, and it was pretty accurate. But my story basically dealt with Brainiac wanting. He was a rogue AI that wanted life. You know, he wanted to be Robert Vaughn in Demon Seed. I live. I mean, he wanted that, and that was his motivating. And he comes to Earth and sort of bamboozled everybody and says he's a Kryptonian like Superman, and he comes down and starts optimizing the planet, and at the same time, you know, curing diseases, giving unlimited power sources to countries, and at the same time, he's discrediting Superman, and it gets to the point where Superman is ostracized from the world as Brainiac fixes everybody's problems, which obviously Jor-El told Superman not to do, and it creates a beef. And it was. I thought it was a cool idea, but it never moved beyond the discussion stages that we were at Coffee Bean talking over our iced lattes about it. But yeah, it was. But I think it would have. I think we had a really good story that we came up with. I think it would have worked. The problem was, you know, I didn't have any credibility as a screenwriter or somebody with Brian. So, you know, these are just discussions. iCritic, how's it going, man? I like your theory on Robert Downey Jr., and there are possibilities there, but stunt casting is still stunt casting, considering this is something Marvel has been leaning on to lesser and lesser results. I'm worried. Well, I can understand that. I mean, it is stunt cast. This whole thing is stunt casting. But if they have a really good story, and again, I go back to the idea of Star Trek tales like Tapestry, where you watch somebody who we know very, very well, in the case of Tapestry, Jean-Luc Picard, and we see what happens when his life goes a different direction. It's an inherently fascinating way to go. It is a tried and true storytelling trope, and I think showing Robert Downey Jr. or Tony Stark turning into Doctor Doom as opposed to Iron Man could be really good. I mean, obviously, it's all in the execution. Maybe it'll suck, but I think it could be really good. I really do. I really do. Marco Esquandolez says 2025 is the year of Superman. DC Comics will reign supreme. Maybe. I don't know. Will they reign supreme? I hope so. I think James Gunn's Superman movie is going to surprise everybody. Zachary Zarvos, how you doing, dude? Good to see you. Great seeing you at San Diego Comic-Con. Thank you for the brief Instagram live interview. Can't wait for True Noir. Well, thank you. You're going to love True Noir. I'm recording more actors tomorrow. I can't believe who I'm recording. One of my favorite character actors of all time. Great actor. He's in the show. I can't wait for you to find out who that is. Zachary goes on to say, I also started my own little hobby editorial to get better writing while I'm away on deployment. Thank you for inspiring me. Thank you for inspiring me. Well, Zachary, good luck. Break a leg, as we say in show business. And I hope your deployment goes well. Hunter says, surely if I repeat myself, but I still like the idea of having a Borg origin story not advertised as a Star Trek movie, but more like Alien. My friends are. Well, Hunter, if you read William Shatner's, I talked about the Destiny trilogy. If you read William Shatner's first 3 Star Trek novels, the Odyssey trilogy, which is The Ashes of Eden, The Return, and Preserver, it goes into the origin of the Borg. But so does David Mack's Destiny trilogy. So I would encourage you to check those out. They're pretty great stories. So you might dig them. Gatekeeper sends in a $10 tip and says, just wanted to show you some love. I plan on checking you out more. Wish you continued success and good health. That's very nice of you. Thank you for that, Gatekeeper. Very nice of you to say. Darth Plato says, Dr. Doom is Victor Von Doom, not Tony Stark. If the MCU does this, I'm totally against it. That would be just Tony Stark wearing Dr. Doom's costume. Stark going dark side sounds more like Doctor Who turning into the Valeyard. I want Doom, not Valeyard Iron Man. I know. But, we're getting what we're getting. And look, good story is a good story. It might work. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to work, and I'm not saying they're even going to do that. It's just a theory that I threw out there. How do they make Robert Downey Jr. work? And maybe they're just going to make him Victor Von Doom. And maybe we're going to get his origin story. I think either way, you have to give us a Doctor Doom origin story within the MCU, whether it's a variant, however they're going to do it, before you give us an Avengers movie with Doctor Doom as the villain, because with an Avengers movie, of course, then again, who are the Avengers? Do we know? 1001 Johny is here and says, in our world today, a man still chose to keep the name Musk. Methinks because he wasn't an American who thinks movies have all the meaning in life within them. I recall a Von Doom in Kirby and Lee's comics wasn't American either. Show me up, Rob. Well, look, I mean, I'm just offering this point of view. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm right. It's just a theory that I don't even know if it fits the facts because I don't know what the facts are. I'm just saying, I think it could be great. And I think the road less traveled stories are really interesting. What happens if one of our beloved characters, Iron Man or Tony Stark, went a different direction? What if, and because that's a question here's why stories like this are always interesting, because we as human beings always wonder about certain decisions we made in our lives. If I only did this, I wish I could have done that. And watching somebody we know, like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, we watch that character make different choices, it inherently interests us as an audience, as imagination connoisseurs, as consumers of stories. We understand where that story can go. And it has immediate built-in interest, and it's compelling. Now, and the funny thing is what Doctor Doom do you want to get? You know, people are not really concerned with where Victor Von Doom came from, and they've kept changing his origin and moving things around. I mean, I think, if memory serves, wasn't Doctor Doom's mother killed by Mephisto? I mean, you know, if you want to get into all of that stuff, it becomes very, very unrealistic very quickly. So, look, I'm excited for this if it happens. I mean, now I've convinced myself that my own idea is what they should do. You know, that's what fan arrogance is, people. And I cop to it. But it might work. It might not work. I don't know. I don't know. And look, I'm just offering a theory, a thought. I can understand if you guys hate the idea, but a lot of people. Here's the thing: was the Heath Ledger Joker like the Joker in the comics? Not really. You know, a different kind of a Joker. But I don't think. And was Heath Ledger's Joker Jack Nicholson's Joker, or Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, or Cesar Romero's Joker, you know, or Jared Leto's Joker? I mean, we've seen all different incarnations of these characters, and I think having this interesting experiment with Tony Stark, and I'm not saying Tony Stark's becoming Victor Von Doom, it's just my theory, and it's probably what I would do, because I love the road less traveled, or what if you zigged instead of zagged, and you watch the results of those stories. How is that going to go? I'll tell you something. I've talked a lot about this before. One of my favorite, and I'm not saying this book is high art or great literature, but one of my favorite, I guess you could call it a time travel story, favorite books ever. And I would call, this is one of these books I definitely call delicious, because when you start reading it, you can't put it down. And if you've never heard of this book, don't read anything about it. Don't go and get a summary. Don't get the Cliff's Notes for those of you old enough to remember what they are. Just trust Uncle Bob here and go out and get Ken Grimwood's Replay. Some people on this channel have heard me say this before and read it. Do yourself a favor. Don't read anything about it. Don't, because it's one of those things where if you go in cold and you don't know anything about it, it's so fun to read. It's so much fun to read from a fan perspective, and just read it. Ken Grimwood, Replay. There's a recommendation. Report back. Go buy it now. And it's the same. It follows. It might have something to do with what we're talking about, but I don't want to tell anybody what it's about. I know everybody goes in and reads. It's hard now because people, I'll just go read the synopsis. I'm telling you, don't just go to Wikipedia, look it up, and read the synopsis. Because the discovery, like when I read that book, a friend of mine was like, dude, you got to read this book. And it was around when it came out. And I read it, and it was one of those, it was so rewarding to read that book. You know, when you can't, I mean, so many people just go to Wikipedia to find out. Trust me. Trust your Uncle Bob right here. Go get that book. It'll make you happy. As when the world was new. I promise. But, you know, like, what do you guys think? Obviously, a lot of people aren't buying into my theory, and that's okay. I understand. Although I think it'd be fun. I do think it would be fun. But listen, everybody, that's just what I wanted to talk about tonight. I want to say thanks to all our new subscribers here. We will be doing a member chat for those of you who are members. We have these long Saturday chats, informal chats, and I chat with all of you and find out what's going on in your lives and what's happening. And yeah, and I want to thank everybody who is new subscribers, and I want to thank everybody who generously supports this channel through super chats and tips. And we will have the website back up so you can send me letters. I miss everybody's letters. And if you can, I make a plea. I'm telling you, our fully immersive audio drama with people like Katie Sackhoff, you know, is in it. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journeys, Bill Sadler, who was also in Shawshank Redemption. Don McManus, who was in Shawshank Redemption. Barry Bostwick from Rocky Horror Picture Show, Spin City, and Megaforce. He played Ace Hunter himself, plays FDR. Curtis Armstrong from Revenge of the Nerds and Risky Business and Moonlighting. He plays a prosecuting attorney. C. Thomas Howell is in our audio drama. I'm telling you, it's going to be a potpourri if you're going to be like, oh, it's that guy. Yes, even Chris Carr from the John Campy Show does a phenomenal job in the role of Marianne Beam. Adam Arkin is in this audio drama. I'm telling you, you're going to be amazed at who's all in it. Louis Lombardi from The Sopranos and 24. Vincent Pastore, Big Pussy Bumpin' Cero. If you go to the Kickstarter page, look up True Noir and support us. Check it out. Read what we got there. And, if you want to support. If you don't, maybe not. Don't do that. But I guarantee you it's 10 chapters of delightful noir mystery storytelling. Really great story. Jeffrey Combs, Shran, Weyoun, Dr. Herbert West. He plays Mayor Anton Cermak, the mayor of Chicago. Check it out. And on that note, remember, Tom Jr. Jackson is a goof person. He's our great moderator, and we're all goof people after all. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, Tony Stark is Dr. Doom. Again, a theory. But I like it.